Breakfast.
Issues of the day under T-Radar.
Issues are plenty on a Tuesday morning. T-Radar has them for us.
It's always good when a new Villains album comes out, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Eh?
They just keep on trucking.
Oh, they do. And all those musicians that are coming out of the music school down there that where Graham Downs lectures, marvellous. I couldn't think of a better person to have teaching people how to get on in the industry.
It's true, actually. We end up with a lot of them on the Kiwi FM playlist over time.
Yes.
Very talented. They end up in all bands all around the country.
All over the show.
They've all had the Graham Downs touch.
The Graham Downs touch, yes.
One can only imagine what it would be like if Sir Howard Morrison had set up a school of music.
Well, in a way, I suppose he did. I guess, he had a lot of people coming through that were under his sort of tutelage in an informal school, which was really just simply performing. And, of course, funeral today, terrible day for the country, but nonetheless, remarkable sort of week, really, hasn't it been?
It has it was terribly sad, the announcement. What puzzled me, though, at the time, T-Radar, was the metaphors that were being used in the media. Initially, he was a kauri that had been felled in the forest.
Yes.
Then someone else came out and said he was a totara.
Yes, I wondered which was the appropriate tree. And I wonder if it's just what is your sort of particularly favourite tree?
Well, I don't know, but should there be an index? Should there be some kind of, something we can refer to that
Absolutely.
says... Okay, so maybe a Prime Minister is a kauri?
And we'll go all the way down the rank. You've got your kahikateas, you've got your...
That's right, Kolfai.
What about your tree ferns?
Yeah, well, where do they sit?
If we were to fall, would someone remark that a punga had slumped over slightly in the bush?
I think if I fell, it would be, there goes the bracken.
Yes, indeed. But I heard about it. I think it was last Thursday, wasn't it? Yes, and I was at the tyre shop having a screw removed from my tyre, and I remarked to the young man, and I said, "Gosh, to see Sir Howard Morrison's tried." He went, "Oh, right. Who's he?"
Oh,
shocking.
Oh,
the
no.
young people.
Yeah,
but maybe that was it.
I knew who Sir Howard Morrison was as a kid because he rode past my school on a horse.
Did he?
He did.
Was that on the big sort of drugs march?
That's
thing?
right. There was something about drugs and a giraffe.
Right.
And Sir Howard Morrison on a horse, and my one memory of him was the kid next to me thought he'd have a bit of funny time with Sir Howard Morrison and grabbed his hand and tried to pull him off. Sir Howard was
Imagine
not...
if he'd pulled him off and critically injured him.
Well, that's right. Sir Howard was not happy.
He would have felled a cowardie.
All I remember from Sir Howard is him giving this kid a good dressing down.
Oh, yes, he was very stern, from what I believe.
Yeah.
Well, very sort of... But, it's difficult for us to imagine how enormous those guys were at the time.
Yeah.
Him and John Rolls and various other, playing with Sammy Davis Jr. and hanging out with all of those guys and doing that kind of thing. And, he could well have gone on to Vegas and become absolutely huge, but he sort of preferred not to and went back and lived in Rotorua.
Fair enough.
Ate at the Cosmopolitan Club or whatever it was every Friday with as we saw on the news last night, a glass of the Oyster Bay Chardonnay. Good publicity for them.
Isn't it? We'd never see an era like it ever again, will we?
I suspect not. I don't think we will. Because times have changed, and there's now so many more. But even as I think it was Graham Reid pointed out, he wrote a great article about it on his blog this week. Going through the things and suddenly realising all the number of songs that he was singing in Reo, right back when, 40, 50 years ago, singing all these songs in Maori at a time when that wasn't really the done thing, and they just sort of were there so effortlessly. Marvellous.
Well, one thing you can always say about Sir Howard Morrison, he was always a player for the greatest living New Zealander.
Yes, he was. But of course, now no longer up for that award. Although being dead doesn't seem to be necessarily put you out of the running. They did a survey. I think it was this week or in the last couple of weeks anyway. And we've decided unanimously that the greatest living New Zealander is Sir Edmund Hillary, despite the fact that he is no longer alive. We seem to have just considered him to be eternal in many ways. Even though he's sort of passed on, he remains living in our hearts.
Do you think really that's it, or is there just a lot of ignorance out there?
It's easy to forget. There are so many people these days, and a lot of them die, and you can't really keep up with it.
Yeah.
There was someone I was thinking about the other day. I was thinking, if they died or not, and it's just almost grief overload.
Do you, don't take this the wrong way, but do you think it gets to a point when a great New Zealander gets to a certain age, it doesn't really matter if they are alive or dead?
No, I don't think it does.
It just the feeling stays the same.
That's right. We just sort of have them there in our place. But will be interesting, as we start to knock off these sort of great New Zealanders who's going to get up in there, with the enormous people who did these world-breaking feats like, Howard Morrison and Edmund Hillary. Who have we got after that?
Yeah, well, what would you have to do?
Well, after that it was Helen Clark, and I suspect that's really just on name recognition.
Yeah. And, well, and saying that, she's doing stuff. She's over there in New York doing stuff.
She's got a Vogels. John Key took her over a lovely loaf of Vogels. Very, very charming of him.
What was your take, by the way, on the Key Letterman?
I thought it was an incredibly difficult ask. That's never an easy thing, and I was a bit disappointed to think that the American writers had written that, because it was clearly, sort of aimed at an American audience. But I thought he did fairly well. There was a lot of people who said it was cringeworthy and embarrassing, but.
Okay,
who cares?
I think he did right, like most people, because everyone says he did okay.
Yeah.
But since when was okay good for the Prime Minister?
Yes, there were some people who say it demeaned the role of Prime Minister, but I think over the last, couple of decades, Prime Ministers have managed to demean that role quite easily themselves.
That's true. I mean, I think he did okay, but I also think he could have easily have been spinning the winning wheel on Lotto. You know what I mean?
Yes, a walk-on part on Days of Our Lives, something like that. Yes, but I'm sure he was probably a little bit distracted by the chaos that was happening back here with Bill English's housing allowance.
That's right.
And it's been the thing around the sort of the English type Commonwealth at the moment with MPs and their allowances. There was a huge furore in England earlier this year. People were claiming their moats and whatnot, and now Bill English, people aren't going to let him forget that in this time of austerity, he wanted an extra $20 a week to clean his house. Despite the fact that his wife's a doctor and he's a well-paid MP that gets was getting several tens of thousands in rent because it wasn't his home, despite the fact it's owned by a trust. Just I think there's a sort of a sense of fair play, and despite the fact that you think, as the finance minister, it's good that he's found the loophole because that's what we do as New Zealanders. But I think there's a difference when you're in a position like that. There's a sort of a moral responsibility.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that Dipton is his home, and it's good that he probably he's been there as the the leader and the deputy leader and whatnot for some period of years now, and it's very hard for him to get home. I think it's 5 hours one way for him to get back to Dipton. If you pop home for the weekend, that's 10 hours of travelling. But if your family and everything's living there, maybe morally you've sort of it's a grey area, but he's turned it all down. So he's essentially turning down $100,000 over the next 3 years.
Do you think they need to means test this?
No, look, I think what I think is going to be interesting to see is what's going to be brought up now. I think there's going to be a whole lot of other ones that they pull out. I know there's some sort of scepticism about some of the ones where people have, their superannuation trusts own their homes and they rent them off the trust. It's all, when you become an MP, it doesn't matter if you're sticking rigidly to the law. There's a moral sort of thing that we, as your employers, look for.
Look, I just find it all very distracting from the real issues, like using your iPhone as a navigational device in your car.
Outrageous, isn't it? Not only are we not going to be able to, and fair enough, not be able to text at the end of sort of October, but now they've come out and they've said that if you've got a satellite navigation thing on your phone, which I have, and bloody useful, if only I could get it to talk to me and tell me which turns to take.
Oh, it'll happen.
I'm really looking forward to that. If you've got it on your phone, illegal. If you've got an actual sat-nav system, not illegal.
Which is crazy because the New Zealand company TomTom, which make the specific...
Are they a New Zealand company?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, and they specifically make the proper ones that aren't phones, right? But they've just put out an application for the iPhone
which
as well.
I'm very much looking forward to. When I was trying to find my way to Onifedo the other day, I thought, if only I could speak the directions to me.
Exactly. Do you think it's just the case of MPs just still, once again, behind the technology? They don't really know what's going on.
Yes. Well, is it the MPs, or is it the little bureaucrats in there beavering away making laws?
Could be.
And you've got to wonder, do they have a big whiteboard in a room and they brainstorm ridiculous laws and, come up with things that have no sort of... And then they get on their bicycles and they bicycle back out to their house in Kilburnie or wherever it is that they live in those grey bureaucratic suburbs in Wellington.
And try not to get hit on the way.
Try not to get hit on the way. It's the same with these liquor laws that have just thankfully been sort of repealed, the questioning of them. But look, the best quote of the week, for anyone who's not familiar with them, we're going to close bars in suburban Auckland at 11. Absolutely ludicrous. But, and there's a quote I hadn't seen before. It came from Brian Rudman. He picked it up from the Law Commissioners in their report on alcohol. And we can finish with this. They said, look, there's all this significant harm from alcohol in New Zealand: accidents, disease, violence, cancer, sexual offending, crime. But they said that we have to take into account the beneficial effects arising primarily to the individual, because it's... They said the fact that New Zealanders last year spent between 4 and 5 billion on alcohol suggests that consumers find significant benefits in consuming it. Let that be a word of advice for all of the bureaucrats out there this week.
And on that note, we'll talk to you next week.
We'll speak again.
See ya. T